Thanks so much, Vanda, and thank you all for coming for what must seem to be a very esoteric talk on New Guinean mammals in Budweis. So what I wanted to do this afternoon was really focus on one part of New Guinea. And the reasons for that will, I hope, become obvious as the talk goes on. When we talk about the island of New Guinea, we are really talking about a composite zoogeographic zone. So in terms of mammals, there are four main kinds of mammals existing on the island, indigenous to the island. There are the monotremes, the egg-laying mammals, the marsupials, which are the pouched mammals, the murids, which are the rat family, rat-like animals, and bats, both Megachiroptera and Microchiroptera. And each of those groups of mammals has its own separate zoogeographic origin. So we'll start to tease apart today some of that origin story. So I've called this a unique conservation and research opportunity on the Vogelkop microcontinent, Indonesia, because I'm going to combine research and conservation opportunities in the talk. So this is the Vogelkop microcontinent. It's the northwestern corner of New Guinea. Sorry. There we go. And we call it a microcontinent because it is a part of the Australian plate that has become disassociated through geological upheavals and activity. It's a large area, virtually on the equator. The equator is running somewhere along here. The geology of the microcontinent is essentially Australian. So the rocks, we can track many of the rock types back to the Australian continent. What has happened, though, with this piece of land is that it has been rotating counterclockwise as a result of forces, tectonic forces, through about 40 degrees over the last 20, 30 million years. We'll just have a look. Oh, I should just say the main towns here are Manokwari here, Sorong over here. It's the area of New Guinea which is closest to the densely inhabited parts of Indonesia. It's relatively flat, much of it. So it has a relatively well-developed road system with a lot of resource exploitation, such as logging, forestry, oil palm, and even some prospective mining, including oil and gas down here in Bintuni Bay. So just to give you the context, there's the microcontinent. Here's the rest of New Guinea, the island of New Guinea, and here is Australia. So I'm going to be concentrating primarily on the marsupials in the talk today, with some reference to monotremes. And the marsupials arrived in Australia from South America about 54 million years ago. And that's quite well constrained in our fossil record. We know that about that time there was a warming episode globally. The Antarctic land bridge became opened for various plants and animals, and there was faunal interchange between South America and Australia. So very few, possibly only one species of ancient marsupial made it across from South America to Australia, colonised Australia, and gave rise to all of the diversity we see today. So the only part of New Guinea that was in existence back then was this area here. All of the rest are on this part here, which is just the leading edge of the Australian plate. All of the rest is kind of accretionary terrain that's come about as a result of the collision of the Australian plate with the Pacific plate. That collision has come about because Australia has been moving northwards at the rate of about 8 centimetres per year for the last 40-odd million years. So it's moved through a wide range of latitudes. And about 12 million years ago, the Australian plate came into contact with the Asian plate over here. And because the angle of the plate contacts is sort of, it's a bit like that, the Australian plate moving north, coming in contact with the Asian plate, it was the northwestern corner of New Guinea that first came into contact with the plate and first was significantly uplifted. So these areas here, first contact 12 million. This area here, first contact around about 8 million, and first subaerial exposure, about 8 million. These areas somewhat later, and people think down here maybe even 4 million years ago. Very hard to get the geological story entirely straight, but certainly the northwestern area is the oldest contact. It's also quite important, this Vogelkop region, because it was the site of the earliest scientific expedition to reach the mountains of New Guinea, to go up above 1,000 odd meters. And the person who did that was this Italian explorer, Luigi Maria d'Albertus, who was based in Genoa. He reached Hattem in the Afak Mountains at an elevation of about 1,300 meters back in September 1872. He was a very romantic character. You can see his forked beard there. He sang opera as he walked through the mountains, terrifying the locals, no doubt. Italian opera, Verdi and whatever else was on his mind. And he had a very romantic turn of phrase. So he was particularly interested in birds of paradise, and he managed to get a local Hattem hunter to take him up to show him the display grounds of the birds of paradise. And of course, his job was to shoot the bird. And the hunter was kept on saying, no, put the gun away, just watch a bit longer. You'll see more of the display, you know. But finally, he couldn't help himself with one of the rare birds, got the gun, shot the bird out of the tree, and then came up and started crying. He said, I've shot the bridegroom on his wedding day in all of his beautiful finery. It's very, very histrionic about the whole thing. It's a wonderful account, his exploration in New Guinea. But anyway, so he did that work and really triggered a very intense period of collecting through Dutch merchants and others who were going into the Vogelkop for about a decade after and making collections of all sorts of organisms. Soon thereafter, however, the rest of New Guinea became progressively more accessible. So by the very early 20th century, the first expeditions were going into the snow mountains here in Dutch New Guinea. And because they're high and there's glaciers on them, the scientific focus really shifted away from the Vogelkop to these new areas. By the kind of 1930s, this area was becoming opened up. This area down here about the same time. So scientific research moved eastwards and large collections and large expeditions were mounted into the rest of New Guinea. But this area here was really forgotten. People felt it was done. You know, the early collections had been made, and there was perhaps not much else to discover there. My interest in the area and my understanding that it was actually a very important place was triggered by the publication in 1999 of a small fragment of a jawbone of an animal, which was found in a cave. Let me show you where. Right in the middle of the Vogelkop, around about here, the Ayamaru Lakes region, archaeologists were working, doing excavations in cave deposits and recovered many, many thousands of bones. And among those bones was one 10,000-year-old jawbone, presumably the remains of someone's dinner 10,000 years ago, which looked like nothing else ever found in New Guinea. It's a ringtail possum, but a very unusual kind of ringtail possum. Now, the person who described this, I did my PhD with him. He was a genius taxonomist. His name was Ken Aplin. But when he explained to me why he thought this was a kind of ringtail possum, I wasn't really 100% convinced. He had an eye for very fine detail that is possessed by very few people. And his argument was that this single jawbone was proof that an animal somewhat like this had existed in New Guinea 10,000 years ago. This is Australia's greater glider. It's a species of possum, a marsupial, that is restricted to tall eucalypt forests in southeastern and eastern Australia. There is nothing like it ever been discovered in New Guinea before. So this is a whole lineage which just appeared never to have got to New Guinea. So Ken's little jawbone was the first bit of evidence that something like this may have existed on the island of New Guinea. Part of the reason I was so skeptical was the fossil was from the lowlands. And, you know, the lowlands we think are well explored. We also think of them as being fairly uniform across New Guinea because things, you know, the forest is fairly uniform. It's possible for species to travel easily. So what are the chances that an incredible discovery like this would turn up in the lowland rainforests of the Vogelkop? My thought, not very much, particularly since this animal is lives in tree hollows in these gigantic eucalypts, and we don't have a habitat like that in the Vogelkop. So Ken Aplin passed away about 4 years ago now, well, 3 years ago, of a brain tumour at the age of 62. And 7 days after he died, we were sent this image. It comes from a logging camp, as you can see, on the Vogelkop. It was taken as part of a kind of very rough survey of mammals that was done, you know, by the company as part of their due diligence. So the company would just take photographs of whatever animals it saw there as part of kind of a rough fauna survey. Most of them were phalangerid possums with arrows through their guts and kind of looking really terrible. But this was something very different, and we couldn't identify it initially. It was something strange. The habitat tells you the story here. Look at that. And if you could zero in on the eyeball of the possum there, you'll see the field of devastation that the animal is facing. It's just endless logging, yeah? Now, the greater glider that we saw earlier is totally dependent upon tree hollows in the largest trees of the forest. And it's becoming critically endangered in Australia because of forestry practices, knocking down those ancient trees. So this animal, we thought, well, is it the same as the little fossil jaw or not? Couldn't really tell. We looked at that, couldn't decide whether it had a patagium. Then we received a second photo of the same animal. About a year later, someone looked through their files and found another one. And this is what it looks like on someone's hand. You can see it's kind of small. It looked much smaller to me than the animal that we were expecting from the fossil jawbone. It looks like there's no flying membrane, no patagium that the greater glider has. We didn't know what to make of it. And look at the size of the claws on it. Quite interesting. Big claws, big hands. It was a mystery. And also, I just point out one feature, this little white flash of fur around the ear. It's usually pretty diagnostic in marsupials. It's a different colour, but usually the same colour with every species. So then in September this year, we received photographs taken by a hunter that I had contacted on the island of Mysol off New Guinea of this incredible sight. So this is, without doubt, the same animal represented by the fossil jawbone. It's the same size. It's got a patagium or flying membrane, as the greater glider has. The patagium attaches to the elbow here, which is unique to that greater glider group. At all of the other gliding marsupials, the patagium attaches at the wrist. And it's got this very, very big head with these wide eyes. The only difference is black ear patch, not white. What are we dealing with? I can first of all tell you that the earlier specimen, that specimen was lost. We never got a skull or anything from that one. This one, the local hunter who collected it, buried it very diligently so that he could dig up the bones when they were cleaned and pass them on to us. We asked him to go back and check to make sure it was safe, and he did it the next day and discovered a dog had eaten the body. So we still can't do a comparison between the fossil jawbone and the jawbone of this animal. So very, very difficult. We were able to, however, speak to people. We had enough photographic evidence by September this year that we were able to speak to people about this animal, and with the hope that they would recognise it. I've been working in Maybrad Regency, right in the middle of the Vogelkop, for quite a while now, trying to get a community conservation association in place. And I've known people there for over 30 years. And so with the few photos we had, we sat down and said, what is this animal? And they said, we call it taus. So that we are proposing as the new generic name for this animal. It's the first new genus of marsupial to be described from New Guinea since 1937. So it's really quite a significant discovery. And as I said, because it's like nothing else in the rest of New Guinea, but very similar to southeastern Australia, it's telling us some important things about zoogeography. The animal lives in pairs, it's monogamous, and the local people say, you know, we use this animal in our initiation rituals for young men because it's monogamous, it has a single young at a time, and it sort of, because it's a glider in rainforest, it tends to trim little branches and things in its glide path, so it sort of gardens. And they say to the young men, this is what you need to do as you grow up. Stay married to the one woman, just have a small family, and look after your garden. So they say taus is a sort of animal they use to point out all the virtues of a good life. It raises just one single young per year. It eats tree sap, according to the local people. And just if we go back to that, you see how large the claws are. They say it uses those claws to scratch into the bark of a particular tree, lets the sap come out, and then returns the following night to eat the congealed sap. So what that tells us is that it's not only dependent upon gigantic forest trees for its nest sites, but it needs a combination of those forest trees plus the sap producing tree nearby in order to survive. And we know that it becomes extinct wherever logging occurs. We've been back to check where those photos were taken, the animal is gone. Because those ancient forest trees, hundreds of years old, they just can't be replaced overnight. Once they're felled, there's no more habitat for the species, and maybe even its sap producing trees are affected. So I've asked our local friends in Maybrad Regency to try to give me some physical evidence that this animal lives in their area. And the reason I want that is because we want to do a conservation program and we really need proof that this animal lives there. You know, we need something substantial. So the local people went out hunting. I met them in October this year, and they were so happy. They came back with these two living little animals. They're very cute little ringtail possums, which also bears the name taus. But this is the lowland ringtail. This is an animal, it's rare, but it's found throughout New Guinea. And you can tell they're bright red, young, they're very distinctive animals. And I said, but did you ever see the one with the gliding membranes? I said, yeah, we saw plenty of those. We ate them actually as we were trying to find these ones. And I said, really? Well, it's kind of like, and I said, why? They said, well, we thought you, because you want to do a conservation project, you'd be interested in the very rarest animal in our habitat. Really hard to get ones like this one. So it turns out that this other gliding animal must be more common than this, but we're still waiting to get some full proof. So it's been a comedy of errors trying to join the dots up between an ancient 10,000-year-old fossil and some photographs and a potential conservation program. Oh, there we go. It's a video. There we go.
Bahasa Maybrad dari suku Mari terpilih Mai. Kalau bahasa Inggris bilang Mai.
Si See someone saying it's May, it's not Taos. Don't know. Has that gone through a loop yet? Maybe not. Anyway, it's nice to see photos. As far as I know, that's the first video ever taken of the lowland ringtail, so it's worth it in its own right. Yeah. Okay, so that was the start of a very interesting story, but then the story got even more interesting when this animal turned up. So this is there's some skins of similar animals down the front you can come and look at. It's a petaurid possum, so it's a member of the Petauridae, which are the little, including the sugar glider from Australia. But this is a very ancient lineage. We know from genetic studies that this lineage, called Dactylonax, separated from the rest of the petaurids some 10 million years ago in Australia. What was surprising about this discovery? Well, it turns out that there's 3 species in this genus. And even today, though, you look at the literature and they'll recognize only one. But our studies based on this shows that there's 3. This little possum here, what is curious about it is most of the others live in the high mountains. The other 2 species live in the high mountains. This one lives in the lowland rainforest, just like Taos. So it's in the lowlands and it's only found on the Vogelkop. We've done enough survey in the rest of New Guinea, we know that it just does not occur there. So why not? We'll come to that in a second. I just want to show you some incredible features of this possum. One is this finger. See how long it is? This is really a marsupial woodpecker. This animal listens very carefully for grubs chewing their way through wood, and then uses its very powerful teeth to break into the cavity and uses the finger to fish out the grub. So that's how they make a living. These lowland ones are really tiny. They only weigh about 200 grams, and they are the most primitive member of the genus. So the auditory region is very generalized. It's not specialized like the mountain species. And this fishing claw is also very generalized compared with the fishing claw that the other species have. What was incredible as a discovery as well, the only other place we know it from are 280,000-year-old fossils from Queensland in Australia. So is this lowland Camberway an ancient Australian relic that's found refuge in the Vogelkop? We don't know. All we do know is it's not found in the rest of New Guinea. And there's nothing like it in the lowlands, so it's not like it's being excluded by competition. There's some other reason why this is only found there and not in the rest of New Guinea, even though the lowlands are continuous across the region. The other really cool thing about this discovery is that we were able to show that this primitive lowland species gave rise to a mountain species in the mountains of the Vogelkop, and then that species gave rise to the very widespread species through the rest of New Guinea. So for the first time, we were getting a bit of a picture of the zoogeography and spread of species through the island of New Guinea. So that's just our data. But this is for the mammalogists in the room who really want to catch up on the details. I know a lot of you are probably not that interested in striped possums, but we can. Yes.
I'm sorry, I won't be here for discussion, so I have a quick question.
Yes.
I cannot notice the similarity with II.
Yes.
If it's just from some convergent grades or something like that. But even the tall,
Yeah.
looks a little bit like the primate or monkeys. I don't know the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, the II.
Dorbentonia.
The lemurs and the monkeys similar to II and such.
Yeah.
It almost looks like if you give them 2 million years, they'll be like marsupial like primate.
Yeah, that's true. There are some differences though. The claw of this animal, you know, the the claw is just slightly longer than the other digits and is very much narrower. But in this species here, the digit is really long. You can see here, in fact, it's so long, it really stops the animal from climbing efficiently. This animal leaps around from the base of one tree to the other, almost like a golugo. It's really unusual marsupial. And the other thing is that the most widespread member of this genus really stinks. It's the nearest thing we have to a skunk in Australia. The smell is just overpoweringly strong, but this lowland one doesn't smell at all. So I just want to turn on now to some other species that are present in the Vogelkop that are good reasons to preserve forests there. Doubtless you all know about the long-beaked echidna. Have people heard about this? If you haven't talked to Daniel, he's the man. He's just over here. He knows all about it, Daniel Okena. This is an egg-laying mammal. Yeah. So it and the echidnas and the platypus are the only egg-laying mammals on the planet. The biology of these animals is truly strange. You would think, being egg-laying mammal, it's very primitive. And in some ways it is. It has a low resting metabolic rate, so low temperature. It obviously lays eggs. The entire reproductive system is divided still. There's no common vagina. They're two separate lateral vaginas and two uteri and all the rest. The penis is bizarre. It has as you would expect in a spiny animal, it has a huge penis, because you've got to get around the spines. But this one has a penis with 4 heads, believe it or not, only 2 of which operate at once, because it's either inside the left or the right vagina. So it's a very, very complicated reproductive system. They inevitably ejaculate after 44 thrusts. I ask you why, but this is a fact. People have studied this and worked this out. They have no nipples, so when they lactate, the milk just appears on the surface of the belly, and the young have to lick it off the fur. So very, very strange creatures. Really a mystery in terms of reproduction, not just to biologists, but to local people. The other thing about them is you see this rather beak-like face. The brain is actually very large. It's larger relative to body mass than in any marsupial. And in this particular group, the long-beaked echidnas, the frontal lobes are larger relative to body size even than they are in humans. And the frontal lobes are where we do all of our cerebral thinking, our higher level thought. I have a theory that a lot's going on behind this little beaky face, but we just can't observe it because there's no way an animal can give expression to its thoughts. Very, very interesting creature. In my 45 years working in New Guinea, I have seen long-beaked echidnas exactly once in the wild. They're really rare. They're vulnerable to hunting. They're very long-lived. We have some in zoos that have lived for 60 years in zoos, and they probably came in as an adult. No one has ever seen a baby long-beaked echidna. There's not one specimen in any museum in the world. There's not one observation of anyone anywhere. So reproduction, a mystery. I've asked local people all over New Guinea what they know about the reproduction of this creature. In the Vogelkop area, people say, well, they come about like this. They said there's a bird up here called the sickle-bill bird of paradise. It has a very long beak like the echidna. They said every now and again, an egg of a sickle-bill bird of paradise will roll out of the nest and fall to the forest floor. And if that happens, it turns into an echidna. But it's got part of the story right, eh? They know they come from eggs, which is good, because not even European scientists knew that before. If you go further east to Goilala area, just behind Port Moresby, people say there, well, what it does is this. They said, this animal's unbelievable. It's got this gigantic drilling rig, just like you Europeans have got drilling rigs for looking for oil and gas and stuff. They say it uses it to drill into the ground, and then it produces just one drop of blood at the end of that drilling rig, and then the animal go away, and it comes back every few weeks and does a little bit of urine in the spot until finally there's an echidna there, and then it digs its way out of the ground and comes to the surface. So they've got part of the story right because they've seen the penis of this animal, which is normally hidden inside the body, It's, like that long, very impressive, with the head with 4 ends on it. Looks like a drilling rig. And they know that these echidnas burst out of the ground. So we think that female echidnas must nurture their young underground, and they only come to the surface when they're near adult size. There's another group in the Southern Highlands that, Daniel, you probably know about those people who, when you ask them, how do echidnas reproduce? They just say they don't. They do not reproduce at all. What happens is this, they say, that if a tree kangaroo or a possum gets to be really super old, like it's avoided the hunters and all the rest of it, till it's incredibly ancient, then its tail will kind of stiffen up and shorten, and its tail becomes the beak of the echidna, and its head gets absorbed into the asshole of the echidna at the other end. And the feet, of course, of echidnas are turned around. They're like that. They're reversed, right? And so they say, and that then becomes an echidna, a tree kangaroo echidna or a possum echidna, And whenever a hunter brings an echidna into one of those villages, there's a great kind of interrogation. The old men will come together and say, oh, look at this. Look at the fur. No, that's only a possum echidna. It's not a really important one. But the father of the young man who caught the echidna might say, no, have a look more closely. I think that's a tree kangaroo echidna, which is the most prestigious kind. He said, you can see something on the beak there that makes it look like it's a tree kangaroo echidna. So there's endless debate about what kind of echidna this is. So they're really interesting animals for so many reasons. Long-beaked echidnas used to exist in Australia. Today, they're only found in New Guinea. There are 3 species. But in the past, they were widespread in southern and eastern Australia. And here is a fossil of an Australian extinct echidna, just to show you how similar they are in terms of the skull. The genetic data suggests that echidnas and platypus split up 55 million years ago, but the oldest fossils we have in Australia are only 1.7 million years old. We've got a really abundant fossil record for mammals in Australia going back to the later Oligocene, 25 million years ago, and not a single echidna bone has turned up. Like, echidna bones are really robust. They're not delicate like bird bones or anything. We'd expect to find them in fossil deposits. So why aren't they appearing in fossil deposits in Australia? Latest thinking is, well, maybe they didn't evolve in Australia. Maybe they evolved on the Vogelkop microcontinent. And the thinking is that, maybe 50 million years and more ago, a platypus species got isolated on the Vogelkop microcontinent, and being restricted to an island habitat in the tropics, where river catchments are very short, but where the environment's perpetually wet, that those animals started leaving the river systems and adapted to life on land and became the first echidnas. And maybe they only got back into Australia when the Vogelkop microcontinent reconnected with Australia, perhaps 1.7 million years ago. So we don't know, but that thesis is given a bit more strength by the latest findings of these marsupials, which are Australian marsupials in the Vogelkop and nowhere else. So it's quite interesting. So the Vogelkop is home to a number of unique mammal species. These are 2 kinds of tree kangaroos. We have here the grizzled tree kangaroo, the largest tree kangaroo in existence, and the Vogelkop tree kangaroo. They're both found only on the Vogelkop and an extension into the North Coast Ranges. So not the Central Cordillera, but the North Coast Ranges for this species here. So these may well be ancient Australian species as well. The fossils, about 300,000 years old from Queensland, look very similar to these 2 species. We haven't done the research yet to be able to prove that they're the same, but they look similar. So again, maybe this is evidence of a link between Australia and the Vogelkop at some time in the past. We've just put together a provisional list. I won't explain what all of these genera here are, but you can see examples up on the table in front of you. But a substantial portion of the marsupial fauna of New Guinea looks like it may have arisen on the Vogelkop and spread subsequently to the rest of New Guinea. So that's an interesting list as a provisional start to zoogeographic studies. The picture we're building up here is of this area here having strong commonalities with the Australian continent, but nothing from here eastwards having any commonality with the Australian continent. So how could that be? Particularly for lowland forests. If you look at it, it seems incredible that animals could migrate from the high mountains of the Vogelkop through to the high mountains and give rise to new species. But at least for several species, the lowlands, they couldn't travel to the rest of New Guinea. These are mysteries that I really don't understand. But it does seem possible that sometime in the last probably 2 million years, 3 million years, that a land bridge opened up through here. Here's the edge of the continental shelf, so you can see it's possible, and the Arrow Islands here, that possibly some sort of land bridge existed that allowed Australia to contact the Vogelkop, but exclude all of these areas. And this, obviously, the bird neck, very narrow. We don't know when that rose out of the sea, but we do have some evidence that this region was an island for many millions of years. This region was its own island, and the southeast tail was its own island. So when I think about zoogeography in New Guinea, at least for marsupials, I don't think about New Guinea as a single mass. I think about it as 4 separate origin points and start questioning how relationships with Australia may have worked out. So we're trying to conserve the area. There's only one area in the whole Vogelkop we've found where both of those species, the long-fingered one and the gliding one, co-occur. It's in this area in Maybrat Regency. And it's an astonishing area. There's a huge forest of kauri, which is agathis, which is Araucariaceae, the family Araucariaceae. Trees in that area, hundreds of trees with a girth too great for 4 people to join their hands around. The only reason that forest has survived is that loggers were moving in about 5 years ago, and the army was protecting the loggers, but the local people got very angry and killed 4 army officers, 4 army people, and wounded a whole lot more. And so that started the civil war, and the loggers withdrew, and the army has been in just displacing people from their homes, doing sweeps, trying to get people out of the area. But it's that conflict that has given the opportunity to preserve these last forests on the Vogelkop, where these endemic species coexist. These are some of the people from Maybrat, the people I've been working with. So we met just a month ago or so. And there is a very strong resolution on the part of these people to preserve those forests. The alternative is theft. The army will go in, knock down the forests, plant oil palm, and displace the local people. So we're trying to develop a community conservation project that will protect the forests and also give them a future. I think that's my last slide. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it there and open to questions.
I had a question about the tools.
Mm.
So could the indigenous people also tell what kind of tools they used to put on the slab? Was it only a small technology group or a wider array?
They can tell me, but I can't get into the area at the moment. It's totally forbidden to get in as an outsider. I could have dressed up as a Franciscan friar and tried to get in with the Catholic Church, but we haven't got that desperate yet. So the local people know what tree it is, but I cannot tell what it is in Latin. You know, they give me the native name, but I can't tell what tree it is. But I think it's one or a small group of trees. Whereas the roosting trees are the gigantic trees of the forest. Doesn't matter what species, but just very old trees with hollows.
Do you have any conservation-related comments on current efforts that people around the world are employing to revive species from extinction, like the Tasmanian tiger? Do you view this as inherently competitive to more traditional conservation methods?
Yeah, look, I'm kind of excited about it. I think it's very interesting. The only thing I can say is, though, that human ego often gets in the way. So here they are. They say we're going to do the woolly mammoth, right? There's an animal with a 22-month gestation period. Like, if you want to pick a difficult subject to do kind of reproduction in, you found it, yeah? Thylacines, an endemic family of animals, which is so distant from anything else, very hard. Whereas we have species of rodents in Australia, say in the genus Nautomes, which are extinct but have extremely close living relatives. They can breed in 6 months. They're easy to do. Why aren't we trying to bring back the extinct Nautome species as a start? So, that's my only comment.